Readers of the Higurashi no Naku Koroni visual novel are all familiar with its 8-chapter story structure, with each continuously building on the mystery and characters, then concluding with a kind of controversial finale. While many, like myself, loved it and found it to be an enjoyable and fun send-off, the faults within it, such as tonal inconsistencies and reliance on plot convenience, hindered what could have been a fitting conclusion. It certainly was not an ending for everyone. After the completely heart-wrenching ending of the previous arc, Minagoroshi, coming to see everything resolved in a rather silly manner is sure to kill a lot of attachment to the story's grand finale. But what if there was an ending that was consistent with the tone, themes, and most importantly, adds even further depth to the characters? Would that be able to satiate the need for a satisfactory send-off? The Higurashi visual novel, since its release in 2002, has had innumerable re-releases and ports to various consoles throughout the years, and as incentive to play the newer releases, hidden within them are exclusive chapters, given the moniker console arcs. These console arcs consist of side stories, backstories, and of course, 2 alternate endings. One of the many side stories is a trilogy of chapters called the Advanced Story, taking place alongside the main story, focusing on a new set of characters after the Great Hinamizawa disaster. The title used to denote an ending chapter, Miotsukushi, has 3 variations. The first alternate ending being Miotsukushi PS2, then the chapter to conclude the advanced story titled Miotsukushi Ora, followed by Miotsukushi Omote, which closely follows the PS2 version, but near the end integrates the cast from the advanced story with new plot points. Although if you would like to read the advanced story, you do not have to read Omote, which I recommend, as Ura provides a satisfactory conclusion to its storyline. Instead, I urge you to turn your head to what I believe to be the best ending Higurashi could possibly have, being the PS2 version of Miotsukushi-Hen. Like Matsuri Bayashi, the first 2/3 of the chapter are identical, opening with the backstory of Mio Takano, then proceeding to the connecting fragments section. But from then on, you, alongside Rika, step into the most fragile variation of Hinamizawa. Now with the truth behind the mystery and her enemy, the advantage was on her side. That was, until she had realized her crutch, Hanyu, is nowhere to be found. Calling out relentlessly, but to no avail, Hanyu was gone. Immediately, Rika knew this world was not like the others. Here, she was all alone, with no one to guide her. Without her lifeline, this was truly the final chance to break free of June 1983. She knew her enemy, but she is vastly outnumbered. She knew how to find the solution, but the answer is locked behind uncertainty and cowardice. She knew a vague chance to win, but if she took that chance and failed, there would be no more redos. No matter what happens, it will all end here. Through centuries of failure, would she finally get a taste of triumph, or would the failures simply cease? The cause of all this, while happening at the hands of Takano, was also dependent on the victim. Rika was never assertive, while Keiichi sparked hope, causing her to rise to action in Chapter 6. That was short-lived. While slowly making progress to reach out in the previous arc, while doing so would hide in fear of ridicule behind a voice of nihilism. Throughout the chapter, she tried and did make an effort, but ended up in a supporting role. She became a voice that could invigorate one's spirit, but that same voice of hers would not reach her own heart. She wasn't able to plead for help, trust someone other than Hanyu, nor do the task at hand herself, causing her friends to butt in on their own accord when in need. She rarely took the initiative, but why was that? Not only because she was scared of getting the others involved and being rejected for talking about an outlandish conspiracy, but because Hanyu was always by her side. The chance to re-emerge in another fragment to do it all again, with no sense of urgency. Her cycle of death and rebirth had gone on for countless years. Her mind bound with fetters. All it would take was a single step to break the chains that bound her to her fate. There was simply no other choice. So instead of taking the path she has walked for over a century, she changed course, finally turning to the one person who had sparked hope in worlds past. In the dead of night, Keiichi stumbled upon her. The two were alone in front of the village that gave them joy, the village that would soon be wrought with despair. But with this encounter, she took her chance. Even by working up the courage to tell him, she was still hiding behind her wall. But the eloquent speech of Keiichi led Rika to tell him all she had known in spite of the potential risk. About their enemy, the endemic disease, about the tragedies soon to befall them. But all of her worries were turned to naught, as no longer was she alone. She had acquired an ally. Without Hanyu to push her, she was able to fully trust someone. As Keiichi and Rika set off to tear apart fate, but both like and unlike her previous attempts, nearly all the others she could rely on are held captive by the catalyst to awaken their syndrome, leading them to take a detour to defuse the ticking bombs before it's too late. With much less focus on the overarching foe looming over the village, most of this time is purely used to flesh out each member of the friend group, and even branch to some of the side characters. Nearly every major event creates an atmosphere of an otherworldly gravity weighing on the characters, but, in the end, is resolved in a human way, one that we know of so well. Not through violence, but a talk rich in emotion, showing how on the edge of insanity is just a person to be pitied, but more importantly, a person to be saved. The entirety of this chapter is the epitome of what makes Higurashi such a beloved story in the first place. The mystery, the suspense, the raw emotion put on display gives a send-off like no other, reminding you why you have stuck with it for so long. The balance between despair and hope is put on a scale so precise one never triumphs the other. Maintaining this delicate balance allows for even some of the non-essential moments to tug at the strings of your heart. Miotsukushi manages to take all of the development and character arcs of everyone and ties it back to all you have experienced before to create a ride of unease, sadness, and joy. Denna's desire to find happiness, Satoko's faulty loyalty, and the softer, girlish side of Mion are set on a stage fitting for them. It's not just utilizing certain traits of a character for a fan-servicey send-off, but recalls who they are at their core. Their flaws, aspirations, strong and weak sides come together to once again remind you why you have stuck with them for as long as you have. And the strongest points of Matsuri Bayashi seamlessly weave their way into this altered narrative. Those solemn moments of grief becoming ones of hope the readers know so well are not forgotten. And in doing so, allows for those moments to be seen in a new perspective. While parts of the climax are very close to the original, the storytelling makes strides to include new scenes and interactions, deepening the dynamic between Rika and Takano. It's here through this final confrontation that she becomes more pitiable than she already was. Her speech to Rika enforces a relationship that the two aren't just one of predator and prey. That they are just people who live on two sides of the same coin, whose fates have intermingled, whether it was for the best or for the worst. In the end, it isn't perfect and definitely has faults of its own, but everything that is contained within this hours-long chapter is one that I believe needs to be read by any fan. The story has been taken with a more serious and grim tone. The characters are given care, not only to their screen time, but in their development, and also lays the foundation for the chapter preceding it, to build upon the depths of Higurashi's lore. Miotsukushi is simply a great farewell to a series spanning countless hours of joy, terror, despair, and hope. A send-off for hours upon hours of listening to the Higurashi cry. If this looks interesting to you, there's a link to the 07th mod installer below. The process is pretty simple and there's a guide on the website. Just make sure you have the 4th chapter installed and a backup for it. And if you finish this ending, I highly recommend reading Koto Hogushi, another console arc which focuses on Hanyu's past. It gives a lot more depth to the lore of Higurashi's world and the themes present in Miotsukushi. And if you want, I also recommend trying out these other chapters as well. Thanks for watching. Later.